right, so at the end, I just close things up.
You have to issue record. The main speaker is right there. The primary video capture is right there. Here's the live right now.
Yep, we're good.
If need anything, just start to
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you Zoomers hear us?
Yes, we can.
All right, very good, thank you. All right, I'll get started. All right, so we have the OPM update is the first order of business on the agenda today. I don't know who wants to speak on that. Might want to pull yourself up to the table so the mic can pick you up.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Lou Ragazzino with Ray Pierce, the owner's project manager. So the key item on the project right now is the schedule to get the PEF application into Mass DEP. That's the application for the SRF funding. So we put this project and the collection system projects on the application for SRF funding and the intended use plan for 2023. So CDM Smith is working diligently on preparing the paperwork to get the PEF and SRF application in by noon on August 12th. So that's really the key milestone date that we're working towards right now. Another item on the agenda, which we'll ask Bill McConnell from CDM Smith, is the design update for the treatment plant, water resource recovery facilities is what we've decided we're going to be naming the facility, WRRF, and the collection system. But one of the items that Bill is going to present today is going to be biological treatment alternatives evaluation that they've done and a recommendation for the type of treatment system. And we'll talk about, we actually went to visit one of the types of treatment. We have to schedule to visit another one, but we do have a strong recommendation that Bill will be presenting. So that's really the only update I have is on schedule, is that we have a key milestone that we're shooting for in just 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's due to schedule going forward, but just so the committee's aware, we did have and Kurt was in attendance a PQM, is that what they call it, Mike?
Yes.
Meeting which was just to set goals for the treatment facility. As the committee is well aware, we've been under design for the collection system for a while, but we're really kicking off the treatment facility design. And so there was a number of goals that were communicated to the design team. So there is essentially a kickoff meeting, if you will, for that project. That's what has recently just taken place about a week and a half ago. It's a little bit of what we've recently done. And as Lou just mentioned, we did visit the Kingston SBR plant. And the MBR plant is available for us to visit in the next couple of weeks. So we may want to talk about that later in the agenda as to what people's schedules look like. We can also revisit the Kingston facility as well. Play those back. So might want to nail some dates down for that maybe later in the agenda.
Yeah, and Kyle's got some pictures, but I think it's very helpful to see this plant. It may be similar to what we do that's not in use yet. So the collection pools are empty right now. So you can see all the really a simple working system, but you get a sense of just exactly what it is before it's all covered up. Would be good if we get a look at those before they actually go into use. So, all right. We have collection system design. Anything new there?
Yeah, I can just give you a quick update, Kurt. I got Mike Judici from CDM Smith. As we talked about before, there are 3 main pieces of the collection system, 2 of them associated with Mass Highway projects. On one of them, we submitted for the North Main Street, 28 Old Main Street intersection. We submitted our 75% design for both water and sewer to MassDOT's consultant back a month or so ago. So the assumption is that it's going MassDOT. The second MassDOT project that is Barnstable Town Line to Parkers River, it's a little further behind on their schedule. Their design consultant is supposed to be making a supplemental 25% submittal in July or August. After that point, we'll have a next coordination meeting with them to get an update on the schedule moving forward for that project. We're ahead of them in terms of the design on that piece of the system. And then the last piece of the system is east of Parkers River up to the intersection project, including South Shore Drive. That's the focus right now.
Unknown caller.
Our focus right now is laying out the pipelines in those areas and identifying pumping station sites. We think we have a couple of potential town-owned parcels, which is obviously our first choice, the pumping station sites. So working with Jeff and Lauren and Amanda on ensuring that those sites are potentially house of pumping stations. There are 3 stations in that particular section. That's pretty much what.
Okay, you mentioned the supplemental environmental impact statement, so that covered what you already spoke about, is that?
No, I can
spoke
give you a quick update on that as well. We had a call with MIPA and Mass DEP on July 5th to run through the scope of the SEIR. The main focus is going to be on environmental justice and climate change. We're intending to submit that on August 15th. MIPA has every month they have 2 submittal dates, the 1st and the 15th of each month. So we're shooting for August 15th to submit the SEIR, and that would put us in line to get a decision from the state by the end of September 30th with their decision. On that same call, we also talked to them about the groundwater discharge permit application, which is obviously a very important component of the treatment plant design. Reviewed the site history with them, all the work that's been done in the past. First step in that process is to submit the hydrogeological report, and we're hoping to do that later this week. And then that'll start the ball rolling with the permit application.
Project schedule and milestones. Are we doing? I know things have been changed. We need to have a conversation, I think. Anybody got anything new? Dave? Kara? No?
Who is the keeper of the timetable?
I thought we were supposed to be, but.
Notwithstanding.
Well, so it was just, as was just said, the state on the, what I call everything west end, east end, from river, either Parkers or either west or east. Apparently the state has tripped over themselves on the west end, and they're only, as he said, only at 25% design. So we thought we were in pretty good shape. Now it turns out we're going to focus first on the east end of 28. And there's been a lot of changes made that apparently nobody knew about. I don't know why we weren't informed, or at least consulted, whatever. So I want to live long enough to see this thing get done. Starting to wonder.
Yeah, there's a schedule that's been distributed with regard to the overall. What needs to be further refined is the timing of the contracts within that collection system. And so that's something that's still to be developed. And to that extent, we've had some initial discussions about that. There's a stretch that Mike mentioned, that third contract that doesn't have a project associated with Mass DOT. So in that particular case, we are a little bit more flexible on the schedule. And so there's some opportunities to potentially do that sooner than in conjunction with the Mass DOT projects for the other 2 pieces. And even if the Mass DOT projects slip, let's say the one that doesn't have a definitive time frame for Route 28 from the Barnstable Town Line to Parkers River Bridge, there is a potential to do that outside of the Mass DOT project before they get in there. That is a worst case scenario, because there is a cost associated with that to do it separately. There's a significant savings to do with the projects in conjunction with the Mass DOT project. And so that's still the hope, and we're going to continue to push Mass DOT for a schedule, and they are tentatively scheduled to meet with the Board of Selectmen on August 16th to talk about the project generally. But one of the big questions, of course, is, what is your schedule at this point? As soon as we have a better date and time for that schedule, we'll be able to plug that into the overall schedule for the project. But again, another reason to break the collection system up into contracts is because some will certainly be able to be advanced before others. And from my standpoint, that's a desirable place to be, because you don't want to be doing all three contracts at the same time. Digging up entire Route 28 and South Shore Drive all at the same time, they need to be phased. And so that's just something that needs to be coordinated. And as we get further along the design process, we'll be able to better coordinate and sequence those pieces. And that's one of the pieces that not only falls on CDM Smith as they're doing design, but also we're going to ask our OPM to help us kind of manage those contracts as well. So we do have a definitive date on the other Mass DOT project, so I'll end up on some good news, and that is the Bass River Bridge and the intersection project with North Main Street and Old Main Street. That's an advertisement date of next year, and the project is coming together nicely. They're a little further along on that, Mike. I think about 75% design. So that's falling together nicely. It's my understanding on the other piece, because of the dollars associated with that project, it's just become more difficult for Mass DOT to identify a funding source, and so the project time shifted a little bit on that. But we'll continue to push them on the schedule, and I think our hope is that they'll be able to move that along as aggressively as possible. We'll just have to look at our different options if it doesn't meet our time frame. But as of right now, it's a state funded, so it's not to get too deep into the weeds, but if it were locally or a Cape Cod tip project that's funded, if you're looking to get on that tip, that's 5 or 6 years out. That would clearly be outside of our time frame for getting this work done. But because it is state funding and they have a lot more flexibility in moving funding around and funding sources, they're also in receipt of transportation funding from the federal government associated with some of this ARPA funds. There's certainly a good indication that they'll be able to move it along. And in fact, when Tom Courier, the project manager from Mass DOT, comes and talks with Selectmen on August 16th about that date, he's very optimistic that they're continuing to move forward. They just need to identify a funding source that will lock them into a particular time frame. So that's where we are on that piece of the project.
See, my concern is that the inflation, the difference between what we say working with them and the inflation waiting for them. Is there any way to identify what that number would be? Is it worth?
Well, at this point, we're continuing to work with them. And at some point, although this is probably a year or two down the road, but at some point we may need to pull the trigger and do it in advance of their project. They would do that under a permit. We pull a permit with Mass DOT for road opening, just like we're going to do for that middle stretch, if you will, under 28. But that's not the route that we'd like to go because of the additional costs associated.
Well, again, I know it's hard to nail down because you're taking guesstimates on inflation. But again, where's the balance point in that? And again, we need to get going. I also believe that if we're somewhere near first in line, I think our bidding atmosphere is going to be a lot better than if we wait and everybody's standing in line trying to get the attention of the few contractors that are available to do this.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question of Jeff. Are we far enough along to know, are we the number of contracts and the sections that are going to be contracted, a single contract? What I was thinking about is when you do pump stations, sometimes it's better to bundle, pump stations separately from the collection force main project. I'm assuming you're gonna, when we do contracting for the force main collection systems, in some cases they may be running in the same trench. down, say 28, whatever. But the pump stations could be started ahead of time. So these advantage and separating the pump stations out from the electrical systems because different contractors have different skills. So just wondering if
Yeah, I'll-
you got to that point.
We're getting closer to that point. I'll let Mike respond if you want to fill in any of my information, but for the most part, the pump stations will have to be separate from the collection system, particularly in the areas where we're hoping to partner with Mass DOT, because they're going to help us with installing pipe in the ground. And that'll both be gravity pipe as well as the force main work associated with work within the right of way. But those pump stations are outside of the right of way, and Mass DOT will certainly not include that.
I'm thinking about that one pump station over by the drive-in site, which I thought at one point we were planning to not only make it a pump station, but make it men's and women's for the park. Toilet facilities, all in one building.
Yes, that's not the direction that's headed. That's a great question. The drive-in site committee, which I think is meeting at this exact same time right now, are reviewing those plans, and they've decided they want the bathroom to be separate. So it will just be a pump station. If you would like to see the plans that they're talking about, seeing as a meeting at the same time as you, I can forward those to you. But essentially, it's a building that is right at the end of the driveway access, if you will. It's just before it opens up into the field area. That is where they're anticipating having the restroom, as well as a small office associated with that, and bottle filling station.
So you want
Essentially, all the utilities are coming in that area and then dispersing to the site. So for a number of reasons, it worked better for them to have it more centrally located to that site. That's what they're recommending right now.
I was just thinking, our program, the building pump station, I mean, it's gonna be a sophisticated pump station. Taking a lot of flow at this point. Our program could be paying for or supplemented by monies coming for their restroom. What you're saying is they're looking at it from probably a site location where it's more convenient further into the site
For the user.
and closer to the road.
Correct.
Anybody else have questions?
Just, Jeff, as long as the phases, regardless of contract sequence, stay on 28, then we'll still have diff revenue, commercial, we'll have higher rates of flow for user rates and then benefits. So whatever the sequence, if we stay within 28 and short drive, then we stay within that sort of revenue stream. I think that'd be important to not go off the corridor to another phase. Because if we do that, we're into residential areas which don't have all those attributes.
Right. Yeah, at this point, we're too far along to make significant changes in phase one, or we will certainly meet what Lou was just, or miss, what Lou was just talking about with regards to the SRF file.
Right.
That's in just a few short weeks, and they're just not prepared to make significant changes in phase one and meet that date.
Right.
There were good reasons to change phase one. You'd be looking at, years in the future to make those changes.
No, I don't want you to change them. I'm just saying is if you go off of 28 and get into the losing revenue that we have on 28, we don't have anywhere else.
Anything else? Okay.
Just one thing.
Yep.
Are we gonna get to see, like a 75% design? See, as they come in and put it up on a screen, we can take a look at where everything's going, maybe some of the sequencing, because obviously scheduling probably gonna do most of the construction up to the wintertime as opposed to summer.
But well, we haven't gotten to that level of detail as far as the timing. We'd have to first figure out, what contracts, and then talk about what the sequence of that work looked like. A lot of that, the reason it's later in the process is because it's, frankly, negotiation with Mass DOT as to what the permit says that they're going to issue us to do that work. Typically, they don't like work to happen in the winter time. So there would be some winter conditions that we have to negotiate with them to allow that work to be done. It's a very tight construction window on Cape Cod, as I'm sure everyone's aware. They don't allow work in summertime, they don't allow work in wintertime, give us very few short periods of work in the spring and then the fall to get this done. So it's gonna take longer if we don't, aren't able to do the winter work, but it's something we'll have to work through Mass DOT, make sure they allow that to happen. We have much more flexibility and control of that process when we're working on town roads. But on Route 28, that's going to be a big challenge working with Mass DOT. The thing is, we have consultants that have had that opportunity to work with the state on that. And some people will be able to do it for the timeframe that works. That's still to be determined.
The other thing that I was thinking is the size of the contracts. We may have contractors on Cape Cod that can handle smaller projects. I'm just thinking about bundling some of the, or putting these contracts out in smaller pieces that give the smaller contractors an opportunity. And not trying to take away from the bigger contractors, but when we get into this thing that years down the road, we're competing with other towns also doing construction at the same time. These contractors, if they're fully loaded with their workload, their bids are gonna be higher. They're not gonna be one to, once they get full. So I'm just thinking we should be thinking about trying to encourage or provide smaller contracts for small contractors so that we maintain competitive environment. Just my thought.
Yeah, the size and how the contracts are structured is still something to be determined.
I have a CDM question. What's the deepest dig to lay a pipe?
In terms of what we have right now? Or
What do you
what's possible?
anticipate? I know David mentioned numbers in the past, but I don't know if you were there, where it's at today.
So for the section east of Parkers River, we're not at that point yet. We're doing the horizontal layout. We haven't got the profiles yet. Typically, we try to stay under 20 feet deep. There may be small sections where we go a little bit deeper than that if it means avoiding to have to put another pumping station in. So we'll make that, evaluation and recommendation if it turns out that we're deeper than that. But sewers are typically, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet deep, I'd say is average depth.
So that's not too bad.
But again, depending on the topography, obviously, we're gonna have cuts because of that.
Down in Howard and Chatham, I believe they were digging almost 30 feet,
In Howard-
which to Lee's point about different contracts, then what happens? You don't want a bunch of small contracts because the mobilization of the equipment that can dig 30 feet deep. If the machine comes in pieces and they put it together on site, that's how big it is. So you have to consider that too.
If I may, that was actually our design in Howard. We were about 28 feet deep, and it was for that very reason I just mentioned. Having that deep cut for a couple of thousand feet eliminated what would have been a major pumping station. Essentially had to pump the whole area, the whole phase and future phase, just because of the topography. So we did a cost evaluation, and we determined that it was more sense to put in. It's a large cost initially. Once it's in, the pipe is in, and it works forever. Pumping stations, it's operation and maintenance on top of construction costs forever. So look at that in each of those cases and make the recommendation.
Yeah, I just want to bring that up because
But it is good. Yeah, we try to your point. That is part of the evaluation. How big do you want to make the contracts? We don't want to make them so large that it does make it unbiddable for medium even to small size projects, contractors. I wouldn't be an advocate of making really small because then you're opening it up to contractors who might not have a lot of experience doing that type of work. They are capable of doing it, but haven't really done a lot of it in the past. So we try to find that sweet spot.
everybody points a finger at somebody else was a mistake that, oh no, he did it. It wasn't my fault.
It is a great point, and that's part of the evaluation. What size makes the most sense? And we've done enough of these. We have a sense of what length of sewer and combination of sewer pumping stations make the most sense. get the town the most bids, most competitive.
So-
Yeah.
So that brings up a question. Because you've been doing sewers in Chatham, are you drawing any contractors from off Cape onto the Cape?
We had been, yes, so we've done Harwich, the first phase of Harwich, not Chatham, Chatham is a local consultant,
Right.
but we had 2 contracts in Harwich. We got bids from, I believe, 3 different contractors off Cape. One of them was the low bidder on one of the contracts, the other contract was a Cape contract. So we did attract, it was only three bidders on one contract and 4 on another. It's all depending on timing, like I said, depending on how busy the contractors are. Work is going on. But certainly it is, it is a premium for contractors to come off Cape to do work. But in this case, Harwich's case, we did have one off Cape contract that was the.
And there are some of the contractors on the Cape Cod, on the Cape, who have gotten bigger. They're not gonna compete with Robert at Hour, but as far as size, but they can do some pretty substantial contracts. They're doing them right now, so there's some confidence there on my part that there's gonna be more than one bidder available that's qualified to do what we need to do.
That's what I was gonna ask. Don't we have to use pre-qualified contractors?
Well-
Most of this work,
Yeah, this,
I mean, it's usual.
they're usually qualified by the state, DQ, right?
DCAM is for chapter 149, so that'll be like 2 plan, but pipeline work, as horizontal work, that's chapter 39. There is actually a pre-quality, you just have to be on a bidder's list. It's not as rigorous as a
Right.
DCAM certification.
But I mean, that, some of these contractors on the Cape, they're just gonna rule it out. They don't even want to deal with it because it's prevailing wage and all that. They don't want to get into that.
No, but they're doing that now, that's my point. Some of the contractors have gotten quite big,
Mhm.
and they're actually doing prevailing wage and state. As a matter of fact, there's a company other than Robert Biao that's working in Hyannis right now on their sewer. So they're out there.
But once we get off 28, 28 is a real special situation, and you got running laterals across the street, constant, trying to serve both sides of the road, and the kind of traffic situation we have here, even in the winter time, it's going to be a real trick to get this done without disruption. And you need a bigger contract for those. Once we get into the neighborhoods, I kind of think it's a different ball.
That's a good point.
Okay, regulatory permitting update.
Mr. Chair, before we get there,
Yeah.
under the treatment facility update, I think Bill is prepared to talk about that. There's also a couple of design decisions we'd like to get the committee's
Oh,
support
okay.
for.
It brings me back, something bouncing around my head that I should have, and I know we talked about a little bit on Friday, was making sure that the plant's designed to accept the solar input. I would imagine where we talked about, that would be a consideration at the state level on the design. On things like that, so
Yeah.
probably getting ahead of it.
Yeah,
rather
we're
than
not
trying to
available
fit in
detail
later.
yet, but the electrical designs sure would be set up to accommodate that. My name's Bill McConnell, CM Smith. I met a couple of you at the Kingston walkthrough. I'm a wastewater process guy for the company. And I'm technical lead on the treatment plant design, not the project. On the technical side. So we just started off the design, as Jeff mentioned, within the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we are, in that 0 to 5% design range, and it's decision time on a few things. And we haven't made final decisions, but we're trying to push progress. And I wanted to take a few minutes to tell you an important decision that is going to have to be made shortly. And that's the process design. And I thought I had a handful of slides to present to you, so you're familiar with what we're doing, why. Hopefully it's interesting to you. But we're looking at 2 technologies, SPR and MVR. So SPR is sequencing batch reactor, MVR is a membrane bioreactor. Two different common processes that are in place for for wastewater treatment, especially with treatment. Just want to go through that if it's okay with you. So why we have to pick this right away is because the biological process design is the unit process that impacts everything the most at the treatment plant. It's the main process that achieves treatment goal of nitrogen removal. And it's the biggest impact process for impacts on the site plan. It uses the most energy. It impacts the right decisions for the processes around it. And it's also will be the biggest component of the overall design or construction cost. So it's really an important decision to be made. And again, we're looking at SPRs with the denitrification filter, which I'll describe what that is, and then membrane bioreactors. So first, in case I know it's the first time I've met with you, if you didn't get this from previous work, 3 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen is a very challenging permit goal, or excuse me, effluent quality goal. That's what we're trying to do here. And it's really just about as good as you can get in terms of a compliance number. Some people refer to it as the limit of technology. That's kind of a vague definition, but trust me when I tell you, you can't target really any lower than 3. That's it. Influent total nitrogen concentration in raw wastewater is usually in the range between 35 and 50. It might even be slightly more concentrated than that here, especially after phase 1 because of the commercial sources on 128. So we have to get that effluent total nitrogen down to less than 3. And it's made up of all those different components of nitrogen. And so there's ammonia, there's NH3N is ammonia, NO2N and NO3N, nitrate and nitrate nitrogen, and organic nitrogen. Those will all be remaining to some degree at the end of treatment. You can't get those to 0, which is why when you add them up, it's really difficult to achieve 3 milligrams per liter. So we are designing a very robust plant that can achieve that. And the way it works is biologically is that the nitrogen that's in influent wastewater is primarily in the form of ammonia. And the first thing that happens is that ammonia, or I guess there's organic nitrogen and ammonia in the influent. The organic nitrogen, most of it converts to ammonia. So you have a lot of ammonia, and that's the form of nitrogen we have to deal with in the wastewater treatment plant. Some of that ammonia is dissipated or used up with sludge that's generated at the site, but most of it undergoes biological nitrogen removal, and it's a kind of a 2-step process. So ammonia gets converted. You go down the left-hand column. Ammonia gets converted to nitrite and then to nitrate when you add oxygen, and when you have enough the proper environmental conditions surrounding that. So it's an aerobic process. Then to remove nitrate, you have to get all the oxygen out and run denitrification in an environment with no oxygen, and you have to provide usually some sort of organic carbon source, which just to facilitate the denitrification. And then the nitrogen dissipates into the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. And that's how the process has to work. It has to go through these multiple steps to get there. Any questions? Feel free to interrupt me. I prefer conversational to talking if possible. So this is the
Source of the organic carbon that was like wood chips that you were talking about.
Well, no, it's human waste. Yep. So just a little primer on these technologies. First, sequencing batch reactors. You might recall that that's the technology that was recommended in the CWMP, because we think it's generally the right decision for nitrogen to this level in a small treatment plant. But we'll get to that. This is the Kingston plant that a handful of us visited a week or 2 ago. And the SPRs are those 2 square tanks in the back. And we have some close-up pictures of that in a minute. But essentially, the Kingston plant is an SPR plant that doesn't quite have to get to 3 milligrams per liter of TN, but they do achieve a low level of total nitrogen removal. And Yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say about that. So an SPR is a biological process, so it's an open tank, or you can cover it. Typically, they're open tanks. And it's filled with this biological mass that does the work that we need it to do. So on the left-hand side is a photo of an SPR that we designed out in California. And it just shows, you can see the vigorous aeration happening. So that SPR is in the mode of nitrification. It's converting ammonia to nitrate. The picture on the left, Blue actually took during our trip, that's one of the empty SPRs at Kingston. So you can see that's the equipment that's in an SPR. There's air diffusion system on the bottom, those white pipes with the circular diffusers. There's a mixer on piers in the middle there, that black circular device, that's a motorized mixer. And then that strange looking mechanical device in the upper right corner is a decanter. So that's the device that empties out clean effluent at the end of a treatment cycle. So it's a big tank with some equipment. That's about it. And SPRs work in a batch mode. So in one tank provides all of the different environmental conditions needed to provide nitrogen removal. It's at the beginning of a process, a batch, the tank is sitting there only maybe half full with biological mass. And then it's filled up toward the top of that cycle there, filled up usually with the air off. So it's mechanically mixed. So that's the anoxic phase where denitrification, nitrate is converted to nitrogen gas. And then the air is turned on. If you go to the right, air is turned on and it's called the react phase. So nitrification happens. After a suitable amount of time, the air is turned off, the mixer is turned off, and you get what we call settling. So just the biological mass that's in that tank settles to the bottom of the tank. So what you're left with in the top layer is the cleaned effluent. And then at the end, the cleaned effluent is decanted off the top, and then the tank is ready for its next batch. So each tank is sort of independent of the one next to it and just does its own time sequence. And the advantage of SPRs is that that time sequence can be changed. So if you're not getting quite enough denitrification, you can adjust the timers. The air doesn't come on so soon. You can really, it's almost infinite flexibility with how you operate SPR.
Excuse me, this is Laurie on the Zoom. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yeah.
The slideshow is stuck on our end. We can't, it's not changing slides.
What slide are you seeing right now?
The first one.
Oh,
Whoops.
oh, wow, okay.
I thought it was just me, but it's not.
Yeah, we're on slide 8. Shoot.
Says we're screen sharing.
Share again.
Okay, let's try to reshare.
Sometimes that works.
What are you seeing now?
Now I can see they just changed it to the third slide.
So 6.
Yep, I can see that now.
I don't think the committee can.
So are you seeing, yeah, you're seeing the two
One or
photos?
the other, I guess, I don't know. It's weird. It's very weird. All right, we'll try to figure
Try
this
it?
out, yeah.
Okay.
Might have to change tutor presentations. But we'll figure it out.
All right. I think I was.
You on the next one?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah, this one too.
You want to be on that one?
Yeah, so these were just two different examples. This is the SBR plant in Marion, Mass. That was built around 2003. So these SBRs are rectangular. There's no magic. They have to be square. So you can see on the right, there's two SBRs. I think the one on the top looks like it's aerating. And the one on the bottom, maybe the air or the mixing just turned off. So it really hasn't sucked out yet. But that's a couple of SBRs. Marion's plant is about 0.6 MGD. And they're being smaller than what you're on. And these are just a couple other photos. This is an SBR, another one in California. And this is these were circular for whatever reason. Circular was decided there. And you can see the empty tanks on the right with the diffusers, and then on the left, that looks like it's an anoxic mixing zone or period. And you can see decanters. There's two decanters sticking up out of the ground, out of the water level. And those are lowered after settling to clean to remove the clear effluent from the top of the tank. So this SBR option includes denitrification filters on the back of the SBRs downstream. It's just another name for a biologically active filter, and it looks like a water filter. So if you look on the right bottom, that's a denitrification filter process. It looks like a deep bed water treatment plant filter. It provides solids removal, and but it's biologically active. It also polishes that last bit of nitrate that's left over from the SBRs, and this is what gets you comfortably to 3 milligrams per liter. That picture on the top, that's an aerial from Situate, Mass. That's Situate has denite filters as part of their process. And just to note here, just for chemistry reasons, you need to add a little bit of chemical, a little bit of carbon source to drive denitrification to a low level. So just to summarize, so SBRs, why are they good? What are the pros? They're excellent for TN removal. They really do. They're very flexible, and you can get to a low level. The con is that you do need to have a denitrification filter if you want to achieve 3 milligrams per liter as an annual average. SBRs will get there some days, other days not. So if you want to achieve 3 as an annual average, you need to have denitrification filters back. They're very, very flexible, which is an advantage. The disadvantage is that makes them a little more complex to run. You know, there's more for the operator to think about. They're space efficient, although they are a little bit larger than MVRs and footprint wise. And, you know, they're common, they're proven, there are a lot of them around, and they're energy efficient when compared to MVRs. So those are sort of the big picture advantages.
Jeff, when you go to the display mode, we see it now, so you can just stay there.
You can see that right there, that MBR?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So membrane bioreactors are the other option. Membrane bioreactors use the same exact biological reactions as SBRs. The microorganisms don't know the difference. It's just a configuration issue. So this is a full plant that uses MVRs. The biological treatment system is sort of smack in the middle of the picture. There's 3 tanks there, sort of in parallel. You can see just to the bottom right of that white building. That's the bioreactor tankage, and the membranes are held over to the left, and you see that steel superstructure around that other concrete tankage. I described that clearly. You know what I'm talking about. So that's an MBR. This is a plant that we designed that's in Westchester County, New York. It's about a 1 MGD plant. So how do these work? Same biological reactions as SBRs, as I said. The membranes do not remove nitrogen. What they do is they separate solids to a very, very high level. So the membrane membranes come in cartridges similar to what you see on the right. That's one vendor's. Different vendors, have different details on how they bundle their membranes. But those look like, they're the same diameter as maybe a strand of spaghetti. And they have a very low pore size, very small pore size. And effluent from the biological system flows from out to inside. And there's a tiny little tube inside each membrane. And the effluent is pumped out of the membranes to downstream processes. So the pore size is very small, down to 0.04 micron, this particular manufacturer, which means you have essentially no suspended solids. So your effluent would be 0 TSS. It's very compact because you can treat a little more flow in a more compressed biological tankage. Historically, these are more costly than SPRs. They've historically costed a higher cost capital and for ongoing O&M. To SPRs, certainly.
So is that at the beginning of the process to remove the solids?
It's at the end.
It's at the end after everything else has happened?
So it's similar to, the SPR has that decant phase I described where the solids settle to the bottom and then you decant off the top. You don't have that in an MBR, you have this barrier that draws the effluent through the membranes. So that's what they do. So it's after treatment, biological treatment. This is a typical setup you would have for a low total nitrogen. You have your anoxic periods and aerobic periods, and then the membrane provides solid separation. It's a barrier to it. It's a barrier to letting solids through. So biologically, it's very similar, just a different mechanical approach to removing the solids from the effluent. And they work very well. The picture on the left is just a little bit more close-up of that other plant. You see the 3 bioreactors. Those are equipped similar to an SBR. They have mixing, they have diffusers, they have controls. And then the membranes, that cassette that I had the picture of, all the strands of membranes, those are lowered into the tank on the left with the superstructure over it. They have to be taken out and cleaned every now and then. And then the membranes require a little bit more maintenance. And there's that building to the left that to the left of that superstructure. That's an MBR building. It has pumps and chemical storage and blowers and the other equipment you need to get a membrane bioreactor running. So it's more mechanically intense than so MBRs, pros and cons. They're very good at total nitrogen removal. They can get to 3 milligrams per liter. I have some not reservations, but as a designer, we have to be very careful that we don't, make the system inefficient, because there's a lot of oxygen running around that tank layout that I just put up, and that can interfere with denitrification. So it requires very careful design. Excellent solids removal. As I said, basically 0 solids remaining. So if that's your treatment goal, 0 solids, membranes would be the way to go. They are energy intense. They have a small footprint, and they do provide excellent pre-treatment for potential add-on process. If at someday you had to add tertiary treatment for PFAS or for something else, a membrane makes a great filter prior to. So it's a water quality issue on the solid side. They do require more protection. The pulmonary treatment up front of the membrane system is bigger deal, harder to protect the membranes from fouling. They're more complex than an SBR plant. You need more chemicals, and the O&M cost is typically higher. Those are the pluses and minuses, big picture. And this summary table just tried to sort of does what I just did again. I think with the D-Nite filter, an SBR is just excellent. That's the state of the art nitrogen removal. And MBR can get to that goal as well, maybe with a little less, maybe robustness, I guess I'm going to say. TSS removal, solids removal, the SBR and D9 filter is very good. MBR is better. Yet, almost no solids remaining. Pre-treatment for add-on processes, the SBR D9 filter would be good, be fine for something like a carbon filter that you might need for PFAS. An MBR would be better. I think flexibility-wise, SBRs are excellent, very flexible. MBRs, I'm saying average. There's nothing really bad about it. They're just not as flexible as an SBR. Footprint, both very site efficient. SBRs are small, MBRs are a little smaller. So if footprint was your big driver, that might be an issue. It's not in your case, you have plenty of room at your site. Chemicals for the process, both SBR and MBR, we need to add alkalinity and supplemental carbon to make this process work. The MBRs also require sodium hypochlorite or bleach, essentially to clean, and citric acid to clean the membranes periodically. And we have not done site-specific cost evaluation yet here. We're still in the stages of doing that, but just to use history for any value. Capital costs are probably about the same. The O&M costs for an SBR would be less costly than MBR. So we'll be developing comparative costs, but I would be surprised if that qualitative comparison is not the case. So based on that, I mean, we recommended SBRs and D9 filters before. I'd say personally that still makes a lot of sense to me, but we wanted to give you this information and we'll be visiting an MBR in the next near future. If you'd like to go, when that might work for the group. But we're gearing toward trying to make this decision quickly because a lot of the design hinges on this.
But you guys talk to the other designers? There's gonna be 10 new plants in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
What are you betting they're all gonna look like?
I don't know. I mean, I think there'll be SBRs. I know there's at least one oxidation ditch. Membranes do make sense. I think at smaller flow rates. I think it'll probably be likely those three will be the majority. So, I don't know. The engineer thinks about things a little different.
Any, can I get any direction from regulatory agencies?
Direction. Not in terms of telling us which way to go there.
Yeah, not
Sure.
the technology, it's up to the Army.
Yeah, they'll
But
yeah, I mean, if we propose something that had not been done before, they would definitely ask us about it, but they'll SBR versus MBR, they'll take the town's recommendation and see instance design.
if I heard you correctly, the technology is bringing you to the same outcome, the 3 MGs.
Both technologies can achieve that.
But there's always that extra phrasing on the second technology that it removes all solids.
It does.
And that's not a preference to any of the regulatory agencies.
No, the groundwater discharge requirements are for, I think it's 10 milligrams per liter of TSS, and both processes will achieve. Well, I think the SBR D9 filter should get less than 3 or 4 milligrams per liter. The membrane, yeah, like I said, pretty much 0 to 1, maybe. As long as you comply with the groundwater discharge permit, that's what the regulatory community wants.
And you talked about operating costs in the differential. Could you put some numbers to that?
We will. I can't do the actual numbers tonight. I don't want to be wrong. We don't have the numbers yet. The reason that membrane bioreactors tend to be more costly operation wise is it requires more aeration. So those membranes, they sit in a tank filled with biomass. And as I mentioned, the system, sucks the clean effluent through those membranes and out. So on the outside of those membranes, you have that biological mass that wants to go through the membrane, and will start to clog it up. So the answer to that is happening with MBRs is the vigorous aeration right underneath the cassettes that keeps the solids from congregating on the membranes. And that's an aeration demand that SBRs don't have. So Those blowers probably are similar size to the aeration blowers, so it could be, I don't know, plus or minus 100 horsepower of energy. The membranes we use that the SPRs do not. But take that as an approximation. We haven't done the sizing, but that's probably about the right ballpark.
So we will have a financial differential before we make a recommendation.
Yes, we're gonna give you cost information to make that to make the evaluation complete for you.
Anybody else? What do you do with that biomass that's trying to get into the filters? How does that go? Is that similar to what we saw in Kingston, where they actually go through a dewatering process and becomes a sludge?
Yes, so both processes, the biological system as it stabilizes the influent wastewater generates the byproduct, which is sludge, right? Biological mass. There's excess mass is generated that has to be removed from the site and handled. And it's typically at least thickened. So when it takes out of the liquid treatment process, it's probably usually 1%-ish thick of solid, so it's 99% water still. A thickening process probably should be able to achieve 5 or 6% solid, so it squeezes a lot of that water out and makes it suitable for transport to a disposal facility. So either option, that would be the case.
What's the Kingston facility designed to do? Who's pumping to it?
It services the town of Kingston, and I don't know exactly how extensive that collection system
Are we
is.
talking about the commercial district, or are we talking about residences?
I think it's mostly residential.
Why did they put in a sewer system? Why are they sewering?
Oh, I guess I don't know the history. They put that in, that plan has been running since about 2000. So in the late 90s, I think, they had the need to do that. And I don't know what precipitated that.
I thought he said
the
that.
walls hooked up to it, or the former
What's my
Kingston.
point? I mean, is this it's an economic question for them, or is it an environmental question for them?
This is Kara. It's really a combination. We're working on updating their CWMP now as well. They also fall within the nitrogen sensitive watershed, the PDK, Plymouth, Duxbury Bay, Kingston Bay watershed. So I think the original driver may have been economic, but at this point in time, it's really a combination of environmental and economic.
These are the kind of questions lay people ask,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's why we put the sewer in, the sewer treatment plant in Hyannis 40 years ago, to create efficiency for that flow. Turns out now that's going to be expanded to accommodate an environmental need. But I'm just curious if Kingston and all of these other guys are putting them in, because it's a whole lot cheaper to do it this way than to stop popping septic systems all over the place.
Kingston also received a fair amount of septic. Decent percentage of that plant's design is for septic flows. We perceived a need there too.
You mean the truck, the type that's truck to it?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. No pipes, just effluent. But it's not piped to those sources.
no, septic the trucks deliver. And
Anybody else?
One comment is simplicity in my mind. There's a lot of work and moving parts. The other plant, visiting Kingston, it's a lot simpler.
Yeah, the other thing to consider, some unknown, I think, at this point is what future needs do we have to treat for? Do we have to worry about PFAS, and do we have to worry, is there a way to treat for pharmaceuticals?
Yeah.
Who knows, whatever else is out there,
right.
which then the MBR would be better for that, maybe,
I guess.
depending on what it is.
Yeah, depending on, so I think what we talked about is regardless of which option, there's room on that site at Buck Island to save footprint for some future
Other processes.
tertiary or beyond process that can achieve a level of, whether it's pharmaceuticals, PFAS, or something else. It's technology is not perfected for that yet. It's on the wastewater side, it's in the infancy, but it would be probably, some sort of carbon filtration, which is usually reserved for water treatment, but it would have to be modified for wastewater
Well,
treatment.
yeah, it seems that most of the treatment for PFAS is at the well side of things and not the disposal side of things.
So far,
So far, yeah.
right?
It's gonna be a different federal lawsuit.
Just wait. It'll be there.
So the idea, yeah, we're gonna certainly leave space for a future additional process, which we don't know what that would be yet, but try to use some judgment about what makes sense, because you don't want to trap yourself into a plant that requires major alterations right after you build it. Right?
Okay. So how soon do you need a decision on technology?
Well, we are hoping to finalize our sizing of the options and put together, a memo that discusses them with costs. We're hoping in the next couple of weeks, and then as soon as we can, I don't want to give you a particular date, but it's going to be as soon as we can after that. Within a month for sure. We have to, once we know what we're doing, then that's when we can develop our site plan. That's when we can figure out electrical loads. That's when we can really kick in the design for, in any kind of detail. Until we know this, we're sort of doing what if options. Well, if we get that memo to you, I guess I'd love to have a turn. Either of your decision within 6 or 4 weeks. By the end of August.
We'll do that.
Yeah, I think this committee said you meet as often as you needed to.
Yeah, okay.
Very good. Thank you.
I think there is one thing we could maybe try to get the committee support on, and that's what we're gonna call this. You have a recommendation,
Oh, yeah.
WRRF, is that, did you want to explain that? to me?
Sure, I can do that. I think we mentioned it, WRF, Water Resource Recovery Facility. That is the way that treatment plants are branded these days. That's consistent with the Water Environment Federation, which is the national association of people that do what we're trying to do. And it just recognizes that these facilities are no longer sewage treatment plants. We're recovering, in the case of this plant, we're recovering clean water. But there are plants that recover nutrients, you can recover energy depending on the plant. So it's really becoming water resource recovery facility. That's what we would prefer that you call it. It's obviously not my call, it's your call. But I think that's a better indication of what we're actually accomplishing.
Yeah, we did talk about a clean water community partnership when we had some previous discussions. I think this is along that lines. Other facilities on the Cape are wastewater treatment facility, WWTF, and others are used to be called water pollution control facilities, but those are more older terminology. So just wanted to make sure we got the support of the committee as to what you want to call this.
I think you're gonna have to come up with a shorthand for it, so.
WRRF?
Just call it WRF. I'm for it. Call it WRRF.
You can roll your eyes.
It gets too complicated. WWR, WRRF.
Just pronounce Wharf.
Wharf.
WRF.
We're gonna get a mascot and it's gonna look like a dog.
It's better than WTF.
You can sell anything with a mascot as long as you come up with the right mascot.
I guess there was one other decision that I wanted to put out there is whether or not the new plant in the first, what we're designing for right now, will be receiving septic. And we've been assuming to date that it won't, because you haven't septic receiving facility that's in very good shape. So what we're envisioning is that we would again leave space on site for a septic receiving system, but that you wouldn't be taking septic at both locations. And
Well, we're not gonna screw up our septic reception revenue stream that we have now for a lot more years. You're just talking about building capacity into this to receive it in the future.
there's capacity, there's also the actual equipment to process it when it arrives. So there's two pieces of it.
Yeah, so the recommendation would be not to initially, when the treatment facility at Buck Island Road comes online, not to take septic. It would overwhelm it with regards to the high density flow. We did just briefly touch upon the fact that Kingston takes septic at their facility, but they only take, when I went on the tour, I asked a question, they only take about 30,000 gallons a day. We can take up to 135, 140,000, pales in comparison to what Kingston does.
And they don't take
In my
grease.
experience, it would upset the process unless we have a large amount of wastewater flow to offset that high load. So it's not recommended in the initial stages, but I will say that is a design decision. It needs to be made relatively early for all the reasons Bill just mentioned. And it is different than what was designed in 2010. Designed the facility in 2010 to take septic at the Buck Island roadside, but that's because the septic facility on Workshop Road really needed some capital upgrades, which really fallen apart, was losing money. That's not the story today. It's very successful.
We in the interim, we talked about taking septic there as a business proposition, as a revenue generator. And you're right, you probably have to delay it until you have sufficient flow to handle it, but sooner or later, we get to make money on it
How many years?
before Dennis decides they want it.
Remember, part of the conversation back when was keeping the truck traffic off the local roads. There was another consideration for keeping the septic plant where it is because it's right off the highway. And apparently Orleans plant is only going to be able to accept Orleans flow. So it doesn't sound like they're going to be a competitor to our plant that exists today.
Well, I think they run up against the same problem that we're talking about here. They're coming online in September, so just a few short months away. And they're not going to be able to be overwhelmed with septic initially either, because they're just hooking everybody up. So if they were to ramp up what septic they take, it would be in the future, I'm sure.
But didn't you tell me, or somebody told me that maybe Dave, or somebody from CDM said their permit does not allow them to take other septic. Whether that's a temporary condition or not, I don't know, but
I don't know.
again, I think we've got to be very careful about making major investment on the septic side to find out that some of our flow is going to be taken away to somewhere else.
Well, that's a key point. Once all these other plans are put into motion or put in place, they may decide to take septic as well. So the current septic plant that we have, will at some point need to be upgraded, and maybe it won't get as much flow as it is now currently. So I'm of the opinion that we need to make provisions for a new treatment plant here at some point, maybe 10 years down the road, be capable of taking septic. And when the current plant that we have for septic is, is not.
With this lifespan.
But in addition to that, we should be looking to provide that service to the non-hooked up parts of our town.
Oh.
So you go to a Yarmouth board and if they say, what's in it for us? And said, you will always have a place for your septic in our facility by permit as part of the revenue generating process that we're coming up with to make this whole thing work. And I'm not saying we're gonna ever go down this road, but other towns have mandated trash particularly stays in their district as a way to sustain the revenues that's required to upgrade those facilities. So we may have to come to that one day. You can pay those guys to pick up your stuff, but they have to dump it here.
That fight was had many years ago.
What's a reasonable expectation for the life of the existing septic treatment plant?
We're operating it currently to be able to operate indefinitely.
Well, at some point, I assume it's going to have capital investment. I mean,
So we need constant capital investment, and back in about 8 years ago, or closer to 2010, when this facility on Buck Island Road was being designed, as I just mentioned, there was a lot of capital upgrades that it needed, and essentially been operating since 1990 or 1991 with no significant upgrades. We've been doing regular capital improvements to the facility every year to keep it running. So we completely changed the business model about 5 years ago to, it was running it till it fell apart kind of thing, to investing in it every year as we go as part of the ongoing operations and maintenance of the facility, so.
Will it pay for itself for the next 15 or 20 years?
Yes,
The other thing I always thought about too, and maybe it can't be done, but what if the existing workshop road site was just a depot to accept it? And it was pumped to this later on to the plant on Buck Island Road as opposed to the truck traffic going all over the place.
that's certainly something that.
I don't know if we could use the
It's a
existing
good
pipe
idea.
that was put there for
So the
the
headworks could
the
be up
spray field.
there, and it could be pumped through the existing force main. So it's certainly something that could be looked at. But I think why we're having this discussion now is, as Bill mentioned, it's not part of this initial design, to design that setup. We want to make sure that the committee is comfortable with that. But certainly in the future, when we look to take septic at that facility, that's a great possibility.
Yeah, my sense is to not do it, and I thought we had settled that a few years ago, but I'm just one. How's the
I
committee
think we
feel?
actually could go vote on it or not, but I think you're right. I think we did have, high level conversations about that, but at this point, we need to give very specific direction to the designer. Just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with that.
I think we're building a car, we might as well put a trunk on it. So. We're marginal additional cost, because we're not talking about building a new septic treatment plant somewhere. We're talking about putting an add-on to treatment plant to be able to handle that sort of thing in the future. I mean, just generally speaking, when you guys are asking us to make a decision, you're not really asking us to make a decision, right? I mean, you're gonna give us a recommendation before we make a
We
decision.
want your input. I mean, we don't,
Right.
we're a team on this.
You're gonna submit a memo with a recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. We don't want to surprise you with these questions or.
And let's be blunt, we don't make any decisions, we just make recommendations, right?
Well, our ultimate recommendation is not drawn from just our own opinions. We obviously need these guys to set the table.
I just think we ought to make provision for the space and figure in 15 years or so, when we get for 20 years. We can do it if we decide.
Right, allow for in the future. That's it. Okay.
All right, that's all. I have. Thank you.
I can stop sharing.
So what was that answer? Are we not going to do it? It kind of bounced around a bit
Well,
here
I
today.
think provisions for future. I mean, if we were to, we have to make the tanks bigger regardless of the option, if you decide that you're gonna take septic there now. I think it makes more sense to size for the load that you think you're gonna get. That's the most cost effective way of doing it.
To me,
Leave provisions for if you need to add something in the future. you can. That makes
but the
most
only, to me, as an outsider, not somebody who's actually using that facility, the only issue of it at the existing septic treatment plant seems to be the odor occasionally. It seems like the treatment process itself is working well.
sense. Yeah, I think that's true.
Sometimes if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. You got that big tank up there to store the effluent, which could be used, or is being used at the golf course, and maybe that reuse of that could be expanded somehow in the future also.
Your original Kingston slide had 2 pictures on it, right? The first one with 2 tanks, then the small one with 4 tanks.
Yes.
What's that?
Oh, I.
That's the expansion.
There, well, if you go up there, we were up there a little while ago, they're expanding right now. So the original design was 2 tanks. And right now the site is a mess of construction activity. They're building 2 more right now. So that aerial, just Google happened to capture the fact that there's the 2 additional ones.
The original design allow for that kind of expansion?
And we would do that here too. You definitely have enough land for us to. We're not gonna constrain you so you can't expand in the future. That's, we know the town's future goal, 8 phases of collection system. We need to make sure that we can accommodate that should the town ever get there.
It wasn't mentioned that there was a thought about 3 tanks as opposed to 2, but then they said if we go 4 in Kingston, we have an extra level of redundancy in the system, in their operating systems up there at that plant.
Right, and Dave mentioned something about that. I don't know the full history of that. I know they need to expand. They definitely need to go to at least 3. Maybe they made a judgment that let's go to 4 while we're under construction. I'm not sure. I know that I wasn't in the room for those discussions, but that's what it sounds like.
Anything else? Were we gonna have any further recap on the Kingston visit, or?
I do want to get the update on the EIR. I think that Dave or Kara probably could do that.
Oh, that's right, we jumped back on
I
it.
don't think we were in.
Yeah, so did I. That was the first thing you did?
Yes,
So that's what you filing within 3 weeks or so.
correct. That's
To be-
scheduled to August 15th, and a decision will come back from the state on September 30th.
And that will say whether it's a EIS is sufficient or you need a EIR.
So this is the EIR. We had submitted the MPC previously.
I got you.
Okay. Everything, so we're all set on that? So. Okay, now, if I haven't screwed this up. The Kingston recap, which we just got a little bit of. RAC neighborhood meetings.
Bear with us while we talk amongst ourselves. Reason I brought this up a few months ago, and reason I'm still sort of considering is because we are many of us getting questions directly. I'm sure some of our selectmen are getting questions about what's happening with the sewer and with the project. Mostly what everybody wants to know is when are they going to get a sewer and how much it's going to cost? And we haven't really been in a position to answer those questions, but we should be in a position to receive those kind of questions. And if nothing else, provide a listening session for folks who are starting to hear about it, sort of formulate opinions about it, just generally have questions about it. It's also a good practice to stay in touch with our constituency, so that when we get to go to town meetings and ask them for funding or some sort of zoning changes that are going to be required, or any other kind of procedural approvals, that they're not completely unawares of what's going on. So what I was suggesting was that we go into the neighborhoods and make ourselves available. I came up with a bit of a schedule, and I wanted to sort of kind of consider. The idea is to do 3 or 4 sessions corresponding with the 3 or 4 aggregate districts. By that I mean, we have 3 watersheds. Each of them shares at least 2 bases. There's a lot of overlap in it. Roughly, they break down, aside from being watershed, also break down by town subdivision. In other words, there's a West Yarmouth, there's a South Yarmouth contingent. And then, of course, there's a Yarmouth that isn't actually part of that watershed discussion, but it's still part of the town. I like us to create some sort of structure that we can go forward and have these meetings. And it kind of needs to play off of our schedule here. We meet the first Monday of the month, give or take. So rather than try to get folks to come out twice in a week or twice back to back in that calendar month, if we could look at the 3rd Monday of the month as place to park this meeting, then it would give us a couple of weeks between meeting and community meeting, and then come back 2 weeks later for a regular meeting. Again, I'm spreading them out over four meetings, so that would make it a September, October, November, December meeting. I'm trying to keep them by watershed, so I just kind of created a cheat sheet here so you can see which watershed we're talking about. And September meeting, for example, would be Lewis Bay. It's primarily a West Yarmouth locale. We need a place to meet, and then it would be most relevant to the people in those build-out phases. The site selection for the meetings is really kind of a judgment call. We could do it here. We would just be asking folks from West Yarmouth to come here and folks from Yarmouthport to come here eventually, or we could keep it in the district or in the village itself. The sites I suggested here are traditional meeting spots for some of our committees and boards on occasion. So we just need to ask permission to do it at these locations. Some of them might be already spoken for, but that would be the goal. Try to put it back in the community so that folks don't have to feel that they're leaving their village to have the discussion about septic, the sewage project that's coming to their district, to their village. And the last piece on this spreadsheet was really a discussion about who are the local groups that we wanted to plug in to, and vice versa. Some villages have a strong civic group, others not so much. But we could rely on them as a way to help get the word out and get more people to participate. If nothing else, through our own ability to publish this through the town hall, through the town website, it would be, here's the 7 meetings. We'd like you to participate. We want you to come and ask questions. We want to come, please come and we give you some information. I don't anticipate it to be a meeting of this level because you're going to ask, why don't they just turn on their Zoom meeting and participate in these meetings or just come here for these? This is really inside baseball for everybody. There's no way we can afford to do this at this stage out into the community. I'm really wanted to go back and just do the fundamentals with them. What's the general project? What are we talking about? What's the timing? What's it involved in this big, beautiful map of the 8 build-out districts, 8 build-out phases? And you are here, and this is when that's typically coming. And even though we don't have a good answer to the how much is this going to cost me question, it's going to be the beginning of that discussion. I'll give them an idea of how much it's going to cost. I'm not looking to scare the kiddies because we know this is going to be expensive, but they got to know it's coming because you get to a point where it hits them funny when they finally figure it out. What's this going to cost them, and then we're going to have problems on the other side of this process, which is getting them to approve funding for the projects to go forward. So it's for discussion. It's flexible. Does it make sense? Well, it's probably a good place to start. Does anybody also feel the need to go out and do this?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for doing this. And I think you did well spreading it around town. You know, I'm sure we all have our organizations we can think of that could be brought into this, or at least use them as a public publicity aid to get people there. So, and again, I think if we also understand that we're not going to have all the answers, but at least if we then know what the questions are that people have, we can make that better too. And we know where to focus our outreach in the future.
I just want to bring questions back here. I mean, if we discover that most people that are participating in this process are fairly sophisticated, then we can just keep pushing out more and more relevant information. If they're stuck on the basics and still haven't figured out what we're talking about, we have a lot more homework to do publicly. I didn't envision this as a full committee meeting. We can each plug into whichever one we're available for and makes sense for. Trying to avoid having a quorum at these things per se, but if in fact we know there's going to be a quorum people there, we just have to publish it as
Posted just in
posted
case.
in the town meeting, the committee meeting. I'm not sure we need consultants there per se, but
Maybe we do.
you know, we talk about that exactly. Like I said, I don't want to walk in the room, regardless of whether there's 5 or 50 people in it, and download 40 minutes of information. That's just not going to get us the outcome. But a quick setup and us posing them questions and they're posing us questions back. If we can answer them, great. If we can't, we'll bring them back and figure out how to answer them going forward. But you know, just making yourself available is the important part. And I don't think you need more than an hour with these things to flesh out the major conversation. I was telling some of our consultants earlier that when I used to run board meetings, the only thing I promised the board of directors is that meetings would never last more than an hour. And then they all came. So we just promised these quick meetings, maybe we get a full house. By that, I also want to say that typically when a board member had something more you want to discuss, they'd stick around and they have additional discussions. We're going to have these kind of discussions at the back end of these things that might be useful to us as well. So guess we just need a indication if you want to proceed, and then we'll just start putting this together.
I think this is very necessary. We should bear in mind that this has already been done once.
We did.
And it was quite successful. What we don't want to do is to have the citizenry feel that they're being subjected to another same. Somehow we got to post this as a reliable update with very time sensitive information.
Yeah, I attended at least one of those the last time, and I remember thinking, we don't need the CZM director here to spend an hour telling us what we need to do. It should be more of a colloquial conversation between citizens and residents of the town.
We should present it as such.
Yeah.
Not have them interpret it as one of the.
They're not being lectured to.
Huh?
They're not being lectured to.
Right. Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, we can fine tune any of the details. I'd like the third Monday just because it spreads out from this meeting. I like 5 o'clock just because it's technically after business hours. So if you're working, you have a shot at attending. But at the same time, as it gets deeper into the year, we get them home before it gets dark. Because apparently that's a thing where we live now. You can always Zoom it as well. I mean, publish it, publicize it that it's going to be online. Should not be that big a challenge to do that for 4 meetings. And again, if the cultural center is not available that evening, we can probably figure out where best to have the South Yarmouth or Bass River meeting, even if it's here.
I think laying out the logistics and kind of getting the calendar out there is really important. I also think the more we communicate with our neighbors, the better. And I do think we need to put a little bit more thought on the content and who are the presenters and what a common agenda might be for each of the meetings, so that we can provide the information that we think is most important in that period of time, and have whatever resources from the town available. We will need town resources there. Mr. Colby, at some point, as some kind of a resource, I would think. I'm not sure.
Oh, no,
That's
you
what
definitely
we
want
think.
town staff there because Bill's
We
working on the
need-
finance side, he's working on the technical side, things like
A
that.
meeting like that, I think the citizens would want the duty experts there, who could answer questions that they might have. I think trying to keep it at a 10,000-foot flyover is a good idea. I don't think we want to get into the weeds, but I think the very next important step, I think, is whacking out a common agenda and who might participate.
Agreed. I think I'd want to give Jeff a pass because they probably inundate him with every other DPW question on their minds if he was there.
That's right.
So.
What if you approach it from, here's what we know, because in August of last year is when we broke away from BY, and then all the milestones happened from there. We went into a fall town meeting for several steps regarding financing. So if you just go through that chronology and say, here's what we know, here's what we've accomplished, here's what we have to accomplish, that's a pretty straightforward, consistent message, and it shows progress. I mean, the phases haven't changed that much on the map. Because most people, we go to town meeting, here's the enterprise fund, here's the design for the treatment plant. They're trying to figure out the connection between that sequence of information. And that sequence began in August at a selectmen's meeting when they decided to break away from Yarmouth and go on their own. So if you start there and present a chronology and everything that's been successful in, including the June 1 DEP letter and the $200 million, that's a lot to present that's already happened. So it's not like you're trying to interpret science or permits. So you're basically saying, here's where we are and here's how we got here. And that would be enough for a lot of people to handle. And given all those things, there's a lot of progress that's happened in that in less than a year. So I think they'll be impressed with that. Then it's a matter of what are your next questions on the next steps? Because we need questions for FAQs so we can feed those back through the website. You know, when you get the questions, staff can sit down and say, okay, how will we answer this?
You know, as much of, I want to call formality you want to put into it, that's just really a judgment call. But I would think that the committee would take ownership of the meeting.
Right.
As opposed
Oh,
to
no,
staff.
definitely.
With something like this.
Right. And I think it's important just to be consistent so that when you do go to town meeting, you know, different neighborhoods having a different opinion of what the project is.
So there's always going to be 3 or 4 people in the room who are going to want to drive the conversation. So
Yeah.
you kind of, you're right, have
That's
to
going to
keep it
happen.
on schedule, on agenda,
Right.
and not get sidetracked. But generally speaking, I like using the phrase listening session because then they get the sense they're coming and they're going to talk. They're not just going to sit there and, you know, listen to another presentation.
Right.
But I think too, it's important because people have to understand. I would say a good portion of the public that doing nothing is not an option. You don't have that option. And, you know, DEP made that perfectly clear in that last meeting with their promulgated regulations coming down the pike. That it's either going to be your responsibility, your septic, the permit you have for your septic systems.
Yeah.
Ultimately, null and void, you're going to have to upgrade it, or the town's going to.
I think you're going to find that some people who are showing up they're still at that stage of disbelief.
Right.
Do we really have to do this? We're not really going to do this. Are we going to do this? Kind of.
Do we have to do this?
Do we still have to do this kind of thing? You have to get past those, right? That's where Bill's coming from.
But I'm saying, you're right, but I
No,
mean,
we're going to do this. We're going ahead, and we've already gotten this far. Now, this is how we're going from here.
we don't have any choice.
But again, you can't give people specific answers, but we've got to be prepared to answer the 2 fundamental questions. When am I getting a sewer and how much is it going to cost me? And if we dance too much around that issue, we're going to lose them. So
I'd suggest as a third question, I presented at one of these a few years ago, and a question of go it alone. There seems to be some misperception that system with high-tech alternatives somehow is as good or superior than a common sewer system.
No, my interpretation of that argument is that the power of wishful thinking.
Understood.
People want it to be true.
Understood, but
But we heard pretty loud and clear at the last meeting here that the AI systems.
I'm suggesting,
Once you pull them out of the test locations, they're not working in the neighborhoods. So we're
but
kind of
when we
past
go
that
into the public settings, then that's almost inevitable. There's been publicity about it. Everybody knows something.
Does anybody remember the answer to that question from the last meeting? Doesn't that system have to be individually permitted and approved if you're using?
The new IAs.
Yeah, there's some promising results at the test center, just to your point, but with DEP's new requirement is that it has to be generally approved to do it. And that's not the case with some of the newer technologies. So, and we know based upon the tried and true innovative technologies that they don't get down to the nitrogen removal numbers that we.
My point was more, I kind of know the answer. The point was rhetorically to the person who may be stuck at that question, that they're gonna have a hell of a time trying to get an AI system permitted individually for their use. When you're coming on board a sewer collection and treatment system, it's virtually town-wide. There's no approval necessary. It's done. You're hooking up or you're not hooking up, but you're not going it alone. You're just.
Yeah, no individual approval.
Town, no individual. So good luck trying to do the AI yourself and knowing what you know. So far, it's not gonna be a successful route to take.
And the other question that wasn't answered, if you read online about the test systems that are out there right now, it says if you put an IA system in and the sewer goes down the street, you will hook into the sewer. So you have to, right now, you have the potential of a huge investment that you could just fill it in a few years because the sewer might be there. So
Regulatory
from DEP,
requirement.
but they didn't say that about this new promulgation of regulations, whether that'll still stand with their new proposal. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Chatham's any indication, you ain't got no choice but to hook up. And they're just
Well,
happen to be the
that's
first,
how I personally feel
and they
about it.
mandated the hookup, and that was the end of that.
So it depends what DEP
So
says.
we're all gonna go down that road eventually. Who is required to.
And I still believe there's plenty of lots out there that are physically impossible to put these systems into. Either by size or water table, some other reason.
Oh, we know that they're gonna start to get prohibitively expensive for some folks. We all assume costs based on gravity hookups. What's the average percentage non-gravity hookups for a system?
And it is a non-gravity.
I mean, we have 10 or 15,000 hookups in Yarmouth, right? So
You mean for the whole program, you're
yeah,
saying?
how many of them are not gonna be gravity hookups?
It's a fair number. There are a few areas that are pretty flat.
Let's pick a number, 10 to 15%? Just pick the arms, right?
Sure.
But it's not 0, right? And it's not 50. So it's 1 out of 6.
And that was actually part of the,
All of a sudden, you just tack $10,000 onto that guy's hookup. That's a big deal.
and that was part of the conversation at Kingston, because they have pumps in stock. Because the town, as well as was proposed for Yarmouth, the town will be responsible for those grinder pumps. So he has pumps. They're sitting there at the plant, so if somebody breaks down, they can swap them out, then they send that one and have it rebuilt, and it goes back in stock. So, it's another thing to keep in mind.
Oh, this is the September 19th meeting. Welcome to the September 19th meeting.
Yeah. And maybe we'll have better
I'm not-
answers.
I'm not prepared to give definitive answers to anything, because.
We can't,
Right,
above our head.
but at least we know what's on their mind. when they're having-
All right, well, we'll fine tune this. Again, I think that's a great setup you've come up with, so we'll work on that.
I'll coordinate with staff for.
Yep.
And then have more formal.
Same thing, find out if those locations are available, we'd like to be there.
So by this meeting, we can publicize. September meeting for the whole slew of them.
Yeah, I think we advertise them all together so people understand if they miss one, they can go to the other.
We understand the time frame between this meeting and the next meeting, 6 weeks. This is the first meeting in 6 weeks.
Okay. Friends of Bass River update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Rick Bishop. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Bass River, and I have 2 things to share with you this evening. The first is, you may or may not know that we have 7 locations on Bass River that we are comprehensively water quality monitoring. We partnered with the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, and this year, coincidentally, I guess, we are testing for nitrogen, dissolved oxygen, phosphorus, salinity, turbidity, and temperature. And we have, we're building a very comprehensive database to understand what's happening with water quality in Bass River. 8 years ago, the MEP project called for a 73% reduction in nitrogen in Mill Pond and a 46% reduction for the remainder of Bass River. It's pretty significant. What I have, that was the good news department. And I think I have in the bad news department, photographs I took on July 7th. And this is typically what we see in August. And this shows a rather significant algae bloom. Again, it was on July 7th, and the water temperature was 75 degrees, which is much lower than I would expect to see this kind of algae bloom on Bass River. This photograph shows that it's essentially the same thing, a smaller area. And we have about 4 feet of algae attaching itself to the bottom. And again, we are at least a month earlier than typically we would see this kind of algae bloom. And we've had a temperature spike in the last week. I was at 83 degrees today. So if there's any question in the naysayers about nitrogen problems on Bass River, we can show them pretty clearly that it's significant. And this, I think you'll all be surprised to hear that this location was south of the Route 6 bridge. Now, quite often we hear, oh, you're having that bloom in Fallons Pond or in Mill Pond. This was south of the bridge on Bass River. So it's significant. And, you know, I'm hearing the presentation about the plant. We need to make sure, in my opinion, that the nitrogen is number one in terms of our consideration going forward. That's what I have this afternoon for you, Kurt. Thank you.
You want to talk about money?
No, thank you. Not
No?
today.
Didn't you get some design money or not?
We're not ready to release that yet,
Okay.
but it's we have some pretty exciting.
Making
news coming.
progress. How's
We're
that?
making great progress.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Where are these sampling sites?
That is an Indian lands area. You know what that is? The narrows south of the bicycle trail bridge. It narrows up pretty significantly. And there's a small cove right there. And that was where I shot that.
No, I mean,
Oh, the sampling sites for the water testing? Of course. We start in Mill Pond. We have Fallons Pond. We have Kelly's Bay. We have Grand Cove. We have Edith's Landing. We have the Bass River Yacht Club. And we have an area in the Fingers near the West End Yacht Club. So it's a nice overview of the river.
these are taken in the center of the river.
They're typically off docks. So it's just easier for our volunteer crew to work weekly. And these are taken weekly.
They're just grabs.
Well, grab samples. We have very specific depths and locations that we sample from every week. So it's, again, to have our database be accurate, we make sure that the samples are very consistent. And so we're very fortunate. We have 7 2-person volunteer teams that are out there every week. Anything else?
If you subscribe to their newsletter, their email, a lot of times it'll show a map of where all the testing stations are, what's going on with them.
I'd be happy
So
to
it's
show
a
you
good
some.
resource for Bass River information. All right, future meeting dates and agenda items. It seems like we need to talk about decisions on the design of the plant mostly, and probably the filings. Started to look at my calendar.
You want to talk about the SPR or MVR visits, and what dates might
Sure.
work for people? So would you say something in the next 2 weeks would be available for MVR?
If you can, that would be great. You know, we're trying to, that's like our #1 priority is to try to get this evaluation complete. So yes. we can do it next week too. Okay. And I would like to just propose a date, you know, maybe 2 options to the plant staff up there, say, you know, you take us on either of these 2 days.
I guess the next question is who's really interested in going up there? I hate to take everybody's time if people aren't going to show up either. So,
Well, let me ask a question. To what degree would you suggest that those actual site visits really help inform us in any way more than your presentation, which was quite good, by the way.
Oh.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know, maybe looks like the last one I have might be able to answer that better than me. You can see the scale of it and maybe get a feel for how technically advanced some of these places are. If you feel like you have a good feel for it, trip, but you haven't been to a plant before and you don't really know the scale of what we're talking about.
Right, the big decision right now, because it impacts or started the work, is the technology. So that's why a lot of today's discussion was about that. But you know, at future meetings, there's going to be review of the treatment plant facilities itself, and you can see you know, what other facilities might be available, size of the lab, or whether there is a lab, the size of kind of vehicle storage area. In Kingston, they didn't have any vehicle storage area, and that was problematic. You know, so there's questions, and I found it to be very valuable, but I think it's really up to the committee members how comfortable you feel. And so it's more than just technology, there's other aspects of the facility, the layout, the flow. You know, you really get into details with regards to how they do water and UV technology, all things that will be part of our facility in Yarmouth. It depends on how detailed you want to be on what's going on, and you know, I guess my whole point is there'll be future decisions that we need to make that a visit will help inform.
Yeah, I think it's beneficial. Like I said, I just don't want to have everybody spend time setting us up to have 3 people show up or 2 people. I hope that we'd have a you know, decent number of people who are willing to go. And I know for other reasons, people couldn't last time. So,
Jeff, is this decision necessary for the August 12th deadline? 3 weeks that we mentioned?
For the PDF submittal?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
All right.
I think we can submit what we
Okay.
have. It's more of just our overall design schedule.
All right.
You know, it's almost more of an internal to the town thing. We need to make progress on this.
Yeah, it's probably more feeding towards getting a good number for town meeting in the spring.
Right.
Because the goal is to have the 60% design plans and the engineers estimate off those plans for the spring town meeting, and until we can get further along the design to get to 60%. Those are kind of a critical path to get there.
Right.
it was also, last time, I know the attempt was made to do both tours in one day. Do we not want to bother with the other? Or do we still want to look at that?
I think if we pick a date, I feel like Kingston, we have people there, you know, C.D.M. Smith has a resident engineer there on the construction project. I feel like a pretty, whatever day we can serve for Cohasset, I feel like we can probably take stuff. I think if you haven't been there, it would be valuable. It's right on the way.
And we could probably set up the 2 vehicles like we did last time, and people want to go see, yes, you know, they can do it after, or we can just come back here. So we try to be flexible.
Because I think having that tour was beneficial. And I think for the lay people, it's even more because, you know, you're talking engineer stuff that most of us sit there and look at, and scratch our head, but so to see it in action, I think is very worthwhile.
I agree, and also regarding odor control.
Yeah,
We went through that process from where they receive it and then on down the line. That was noticeable.
yeah, I think that's going to be a key component of what we do here in Yarmouth. Because if it stinks, it could
Right.
have the best treatment level in the world and nobody's going to be happy with it. So,
Sorry to laugh, but is there any relevance to the Hyannis treatment plant to this conversation?
I have not personally been to Hyannis, so I would say yes, because it's a treatment plant that's been running, and it's just would improve your overall understanding of what these places are all about. I don't know the specifics, but absolutely. Or Barnstable.
I go to Paris when you can go to Montreal, so.
well, I think the point is
It's not
because
the SPR, it's not that type of technology.
Okay, so that's one of the issues. I mean, it just triggered my memory of the smell of the plant.
it's actually not the plant,
Bring it up.
that's the
It's
smell.
always been
Yeah.
an issue,
Oh, yeah.
as long as that plant's been there. So I'm wondering if this.
But I think the other
people's
benefit,
perceptions are gonna be, is that what you're putting next to? Luckily, we're sticking it in between 2 giant cranberry bogs and 1 small neighborhood. Yeah, so we're not gonna have the same kind of issues. Yes.
I think seeing the way it's constructed, but you're gonna see some stuff in use and some stuff that's not in use yet, which I thought was very helpful for people to see it. Yeah, he was very helpful, yeah.
Lori. And as well. What are the challenges?
What do you like and don't like about the certain way their design was?
Yeah, what would you do different next time type questions? Okay. So what, we'll let you all set up a date or 2 and then So we
Okay,
can
sure.
do
Is there any particular?
Yes, since we're all here, I think this would be helpful. I know that just tracing down the emails and trying to pick the dates out is a little more difficult.
Right.
I mean, most people here, we could try to pick a couple dates while.
Yeah, is there a day of the week that's better or worse? Let's start with that.
I'm just gonna say for myself, 'cause I didn't go the last time, only Tuesday and Thursday work for me, so.
Tuesdays and Thursdays?
I'm good with Tuesday and Thursday. Kind of an all day affair.
If we do both, but we were done in the morning pretty well. Yeah, because Kyle had to get back quick, so
Right, it's only one
he
facility.
kind of rushed us.
All right, so I can ask, I know. Next week is the 26th and 28th, it's Tuesday and Thursday. Ask if plant folks have any problem with those.
Sounds good.
Oh, I got jury duty
Oh, boy.
Which day?
that. Maybe I get bounced.
Guilty.
You gotta go, you gotta go.
Just
Hang
choose
on,
choose it by the weather, pick the hottest day of the year, please go up.
Right, if the odor control is good on the house.
It's
Okay, so 26th and 28th, I'll see. See what-
I'm hoping I get bounced. I'll make some statement that. throw me out.
Must be guilty who's charged.
I'll count.
That's a good excuse.
I'll count the if you walk in there saying everyone's innocent, that's it.
Okay, I will get back to Jeff. By that. Everybody on those 2 days.
Great.
So let's see. Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, was anybody prepared to speak on that?
I don't have the numbers on that, but I do try to attend the meetings. They've been remote, so it's been a lot easier to do that. And I will say the good news that came out of this latest round of awards is they've yet again awarded 25% subsidies to every application that's been submitted. So that's all good news. The more challenging news is none of them have been anywhere near the cost of the Yarmouth request that they'll see next year. So whether they can continue to grant the 25% subsidies, we'll have to see. We've got a good case because they always talk about economic justice and those types of concerns and needs for a program. I think we have a good case in Yarmouth for all those types of things. But some of the other projects have been broken up into smaller, and again, this will be dependent on the contracts, the size of contracts and the asks. But most of them have been between the $8 to $12 million range. Multiple requests from individual communities in those ranges, but we're talking about something for us next year that could be in the $160 million range. So that's a whole new level. But the good news, and we'll leave it at that, is that every community that's asked has been granted 25% subsidy. So that is a real good news. And that continued even this year. So each year that committee has been talking about, what do future revenues look like? Can we support this, that type of thing? And then the other piece of the governor has made a request for $200 million. You probably heard some of that. Part of that is to go into this trust fund to shore it up for future asks and bigger asks like Yarmouth. So that's really where it stands. I don't have the individual numbers. It's been all good news for everybody that's asked.
And some of the federal money is being funneled through the same process, right? Okay. Water health, future role in wastewater planning. Nobody's here. I guess they had their own meeting, their meeting at the same time today. So,
They always meet at the same time.
so. Yeah, I think they're twice a month. I'm not sure. Guessing first and third, but. So I did ask questions at the last meeting that we had with the DEP. Hopefully somebody will take them seriously and tell me I have no idea, or yeah, maybe we can do something about this. Well, I'll keep an eye on that. And now the committee reorganization. So for those of you who would like to be chair, but don't like the way I'm doing it, here's your chance.
That's not a formal resignation, is it?
Not yet, we're getting there.
So I motion for the time being that you remain chair.
I'll second that.
It's like you're my friend.
Just like rats jumping off the ship.
I know. I'm gonna be the last rat standing on it.
If you want, if you'd like to clue us in what your thinking is in terms of your longevity, you're around for.
I do not want to leave this process until it's done, but I am very frustrated.
Sorry,
So
that's kind of vague, right? When you say done.
there's a lot of problems with communication and things are happening that this committee should know about, not. And for as much as I ask questions for it to be improved, it does not improve. And remember, we're the ones that are all doing this for nothing. We don't get paid.
Sorry, guys. We volunteered to be here. When you say until it's done, we're talking till the next town meeting.
Town meeting,
we're talking to the next. But that's till the town meeting.
At least. I'd like to see us, I'd like to stick around till next spring, but again, things have got to change. It's just not
You're
gonna work.
talking just about leadership role, because you were just appointed for only 2 years.
Well, I can still be on a committee,
Right,
just
still stay on the committee.
maybe.
Okay,
You have no idea how many hours I put in.
we do, well, now we do, and.
I don't mind. I'll be honest and I'm frustrated and I just wish that some things would get better. I hope they will.
Could you give us more specifics about the cause of your frustrations?
There are decisions being made that don't include this. We've had staff members who are doing things on their own without any consideration of anybody else but themselves. And I'm not saying there's evil intent in it, but this process, I'll speak for myself. People ask me what we're doing, these questions that we've talked about tonight. And I say, here's what's going to happen. Here's what I think is going to happen. And then I turn around and now the time frame has been changed or the design changed. Phasing's changed. I'm okay if there's a reason why we need to do it, but we should all know so we don't look stupid talking to the public about what we know is going on.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's very, very important that communication get much better with everybody. There it is.
Thank you.
But since you stuck me with this for a little bit longer, I'll have to get through it.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, should we
Or do you
finish
need
out the
a new
motion on
date?
his appointment?
I was taking it as one
I
last
can't-
chance not to change his mind.
Oh, okay.
so. Once we get it going, he just. Yeah, I quit.
I'm trying,
So I
Oh,
just
I'm
want,
sorry,
I just want, I
If
just
you'd
want,
like to make it
I
formal,
want, you've already made a motion, it's been seconded. And we had discussion, we should take a vote.
go ahead. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
For the record, since we didn't take
Roll call.
roll call, we have. one
Oh, I'm
member
sorry.
online.
Is she still up there?
We had
I
one
haven't seen
member
her.
online, but now we don't. So
That's why I assumed she was at her board health meeting.
okay, so we have one person who stepped out of the meeting, but she was here at the beginning. Okay, Mary?
Yes,
Tom, what is his status? Is he on this?
Tom Roach has resigned.
Okay, so he's out. So
But-
everybody else is here.
Yes,
Okay.
but Tom won't put it in writing, so I need to get that dealt with somehow. So that we can replace him. Which is unfortunate. But he told, for personal reasons, he called me, he said he just can't do it.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Another one? All right, since I don't.
Is there a
think
date
anybody-
for the next meeting?
Is there would it be a good idea to meet on August 1st? I'm relying on all of you to tell me you have
You
something to
be ready
say.
by
August first, no, that would be too early to get you material. that you need.
8th, 15th.
Maybe 15.
All right.
Get your stuff in advance.
Like I said, if we need to meet sooner, I'm certainly willing to do that, but I don't want to meet just so we can all look at each other. 'Cause
Yeah, no, I.
We can do that anyways.
August 15th.
All right, very good then. Thank you, sir. Keep it up. Doing a good job.
Those are impressive.
Yeah.
Very.
Like I said, they have an email you can sign up for, or just go to their website. It's very helpful. All right, so we didn't vote, so
The messenger.
all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you all.